Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Our division previews continue today. We're going to the AFC North, home of the Steelers and Bengals and Browns and the Ravens. And, of course, usually we'll talk with Andrew DeCecco for our previews. But this week, pinch hitting in the division preview slot, it's the great Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. Jeff, we get to talk a little bit outside the Eagles today, as Andrew usually does such a good job with. You are on the clock now for the AFC North, which is, by the way, a very difficult, very tough division here that thankfully the Eagles do not have to have the cross-division matchups with them this year. You got really, how many playoff teams do you have in the AFC North? You got 2 or 3?
Oh, man. I've been burned by this before, leaving the Steelers out. They always seem to find a way, even with their I guess with Aaron Rodgers as their quarterback. I can see 3. Last year I think the Bengals just missed it by they weren't able to get in despite their winning streak at the end of last year. But I think this time you're going to see 3.
Yep,
including perhaps the best team in the NFL.
Yes, and we're going to start with them. The Baltimore Ravens, everybody. We'll start with the Ravens in our AFC North previews today, the possible best team in the NFL. Let's take a look at first the Baltimore Ravens, and is this the year? We've talked about Jalen Hurts and quarterback lists, and many people in the quarterback list have Lamar Jackson, but does he have enough around him this time on the offensive side of the ball? Have they done enough? They drafted defense in the first 2 rounds this past year. So when you look at the Ravens offense, you look at a team that is finally able to get past some of the problems, the limitations they've had in those big playoff games.
Yeah, and obviously they had 2 really killer turnovers in their last year in their playoff game that ended their season. Otherwise, they're a pretty darn good team and a pretty good offensive team. Really, the only change for them offensively is no more Nelson Aguilar. DeAndre Hopkins is in, but you still have Rashad Bateman, who, man, I think a lot of people, including myself, kind of signed his death certificate a couple of years ago, but he wound up bouncing back and plays a good role for them. Zay Flowers. Ronnie Stanley, they brought back a left tackle. At times he still plays like a really good elite left tackle in this league when healthy. Tyler Lindenbaum, their center. They have not, to my knowledge, lost anybody on offense that they wanted to keep. Or I think even Andrew Voorhees at left guard is going to wind up being an upgrade for them there. So they are about as deep and talented as long as they have Lamar Jackson and as long as they've got had Derrick Henry healthy. And again, you add DeAndre Hopkins, see if he's got some juice left in the tank. They're a little bit deeper because they signed Joe Noteboom as a backup. Ben Cleveland's a backup. So they're deep. They've got Cooper Rush as a backup quarterback. We know he started a decent number of games for the Cowboys. So it's hard to look at their offense and say they have a weakness there.
Yeah, big time. You talking about the receiving corps. Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, DeAndre Hopkins. Is that the best, and Mark Andrews? That's probably the best trio of guys that Lamar Jackson has had. You add Derrick Henry to that mix. This might be the best overall offense in the Lamar Jackson area, I guess?
Yeah, and think about I think last year was the first year with Todd Monken. Am I correct on that? That the offensive coordinator?
I think so, yeah.
He's still in the early stages, and they had such a good year, with that marriage between the two. It should only get better. Should only get more comfortable. So, and remember, I didn't mention Isaiah Likely. So even if you're playing more 2 tight end and you have Andrews and Likely out there, they're just such a tough team to defend because of the quarterback is such a weapon, the running back is such a weapon, and then they have 5 different guys who can get the ball at any given time. So, yeah, I would say this is probably the best overall set of offensive weaponry that's been around Lamar. But really, to me, it's not about that. It's just another year with Todd Monken and already really good offensive personnel.
All right, Geoff Mosher, Football at 4, our AFC North preview looks at the Ravens first, defense. When we think of Ravens, we always think of defense. They drafted Malachi Starks. They added him to the defense. Kyle Hamilton, obviously, Roquan Smith. They've got a really good pass rush here. Is this are they still a team that depends on their defense, even with Lamar Jackson on offense?
Well, a lot of people may not realize this, because they started off so poorly last year on defense under their first-year coordinator, Zach Orr. A lot of people didn't realize that over the last 7 or 8 games, they made a couple of schematic changes. They stopped moving Hamilton around. They moved Humphrey back into the nickel. He had been moving around a little bit. They just simplified things, and they actually brought in Dean Pease as a consultant, and his wisdom was helpful there as an assistant to Orr. But they, over the last 8 games of the year, were number 2 overall defensively to the Philadelphia Eagles. So a lot of people look at last year and be like, man, they weren't as good defensively as they were under Mike McDonald, and they're right for the first half of the season, but the second half of the season, they were right up there. And again, no major losses on defense. They bring all their big guns back with Nnamdi Madubuike, and they bring in they've got Kyle Van Noy, Trenton Simpson, Roquan Smith, Owe. You might look at their edge rushers and say, they're still looking for more out of Owe, and perhaps Van Noy, and maybe trying to get some backups. So they drafted Mike Green in the second round. That could wind up really helping them out. But otherwise, when you've got a secondary that has Kyle Hamilton, Malachi Starks, they add Jair Alexander, who's when healthy is one of the top 3 corners in the league. And you've already got an all-pro like Marlon Humphrey, and Nate Wiggins had a really good rookie year. This might be the best secondary in the entire league, Mike, by a lot.
And you said earlier before we got to them that this division might be home to the best team in football. When we're talking about contenders for the Eagles' crown, this has to be one of them all the way at the top of the list. The Baltimore Ravens, everybody. All right, our AFC North previews. Let's go to Cincinnati. Last year, the Bengals obviously fell short, but many people like this team a lot. They love them because they have great skill position players and they have a really good quarterback. So when you take a look at this team, and by the way, they also drafted defense in their first 2 rounds, so they thought this offense was pretty good, led by Joe Burrow, obviously Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. They've got plenty of weapons there, but you look at that offensive line. Have they done enough with the offensive line? Because we know the skill position players are good enough.
Yeah, some of that's going to depend on, how well Dylan Fairchild plays as a 3rd-round pick out of Georgia, Ted Karras at center, Patrick Lucas, if he's their right guard. They've got to get growth out of Amarius Mims, who was their 1st-round pick the year before. He has all the tools to be a really good right tackle, if not eventually a left tackle, but he's a great athlete. They just have to get him more seasoned as a lineman. I think if this offensive line can play 30% better than it did last year, this could be a really, really dangerous team. But that's got to be proven. And then you look at the other side. They have a lot of work to do defensively as well. They have not been a good defensive team the last 2 years.
Well, they drafted defense, as we mentioned, right. And this was a team that, with the Trey Hendrickson situation, they did add Oren Burks, by the way, if you're wondering where he went to. Logan Wilson is over there. But you would imagine one of their problems last year, you look at some of the scores in the game, shootouts all over the place.
Yeah, they just couldn't stop anybody. Their secondary really struggled. Britt Taylor has been a good corner in the league. Wasn't his best year last year. Their corner nickel, I was going to say, Dax Hill, he was a 1st-round pick a couple of years ago. They're looking for more out of him and DJ Turner. But really, even their pass rush has been very one-dimensional. It's been Trey Hendrickson. They need a little bit more than just Trey Hendrickson. That's why they drafted Shamar Stewart in the 1st round. Now, he's interesting because this is a guy who, like we talked about with Mims, has all the crazy athleticism you could ever want from a pass rusher, but as Greg Cosell broke him down for us during the draft season, doesn't really have a plan. He's not some guy who lines up and has all these great hand techniques and a plan for how to get to the quarterback. He's just all athleticism, so they got to figure it out with him.
Joe Burrow, obviously, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. Do you like the Chase Higgins or do you like the Smith and Brown?
I think you're pretty good in hands with both of them, don't you think? Those are your options, and you're going to win you're going to score a lot of points.
Yeah.
As long as your quarterback can get him the ball. But there's I think Chase probably runs a little bit more of a sophisticated route tree than A.J. Brown. That's not a knock on A.J. Brown. It's just the way they use Jamar Chase. Higgins and Devontae Smith are really interesting. Neither guy's game is predicated on speed, more on route running. Both are actually physical, even Devontae Smith for his size. So maybe you could put the Bengals like a notch ahead, but on any given day, it could be the same.
Ravens 12-5, Bengals 9-8. The Steelers finished 10-7 last year. They went to the playoffs, although they did lose 4 straight games. They added DK Metcalf to this team, but they did trade away George Pickens, and that leaves them with the veteran Robert Woods. Calvin Austin is there. Jalen Warren is the running back, and Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback. So when you look at the Steelers' offense, do you look at this offense as a better version than the one that ended the season at 10-7 with 4 straight losses?
Man, I got to admit, I'm really torn on this team and this offense in particular. I think when they traded George Pickens, a lot of things made sense to me, Mike, because I just felt that Metcalf and Pickens, they're not the same receiver, but they have some similar traits in how you want to align them and run them down the field. So I didn't know which one was going to wind up playing the Z or moving around. And now you don't have to have that conversation. I can't say that, the combination of Robert Woods and, Calvin Austin are, going to scare anybody, but they did draft Roman Wilson last year. I thought Roman Wilson out of Michigan could be a pretty good receiver in the right system, right quarterback. Got hurt a little bit last year and never really established himself. Maybe if he can come on, it gives this offense another dimension. But right now, to me, like their most volume receiver next to DK Metcalf would probably be Pat Freiermuth, who's a good tight end. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just Pat Freiermuth is not going to keep defensive coordinators awake at night. So obviously they have Aaron Rodgers now, and Aaron can raise the level of play. And I guess the one thing that's really going for them is that I think that they have a very good offensive line, and that can compensate when you don't have great offensive weaponry. But when you're trying to score points with the Ravens and the Bengals, Mike, I know you're not supposed to bet against the Steelers because they burn you every single time you do it. They make the playoffs every year. But I'm really struggling to see this offense be good enough. Unless a lot of things happen that I don't foresee happening.
Their defense is what, obviously, a lot of people look at them. Derek Harmon, they took in the first round there. Cam Hayward, T.J. Watt, Patrick Queen, Alex Highsmith, Darius Slay, Joey Porter Jr., Jalen Ramsey. Is this a defense that you'd say can keep them in games and keep them out of shootouts?
Yeah, assuming T.J. Watt's, going to stay and play, and he teams up with – I really like their defensive lineman. I loved Harmon out of Oregon. I think it's a great fit for who the Steelers are because he's not a finesse player. He's a strong, powerful player, and you team him up with Keanu Benton, who I really like coming out of Wisconsin out of the second round 2 years ago. He's a good nose tackle. So you've got Ward and Hayward, Benton, Harmon. That's a good four right there. And they always, don't forget they've got some good other pass rushers and Alex Highsmith, and they drafted Jack Sawyer, which is like a vintage Steelers type of player. So I think from the front six, they're pretty good. Patrick Queen, Peyton Wilson, they're good. And I think they're good in the secondary too, but I just don't know. I don't know how it works with Darius Slay, Joey Porter Jr., and Jalen Ramsey, because none of them, to me, scream nickelback.
Nickelback, right.
Maybe Ramsey is a movable player because he moved around when he was with the Rams. He plays that star position, but you don't pay a guy $26 million to sort of not really be an ace at one spot. So I don't know how that's going to work out. I trust Mike Tomlin will figure it out, and egos will be checked out the door. So they certainly have talent there. Deshaun Elliott's a really good safety for them that not a lot of people talk about. He's sort of the glue for their back end. So again, this team, they're sort of reminded like how we've talked about the Giants over the last few years, where you have a lot of really good defensive players, but they can't just go out there and carry a dysfunctional offense or a bad offense all, week after week after week. Now, the Steelers are better offensively than the Giants. Their offensive line in general is good enough. But, again, you're going against some horses right, on offense against the Bengals and against the Ravens. And, you're asking a lot if this offense doesn't hold up its end of the bargain.
All right, Geoff Mosher, our AFC North preview. We're going to the basement. 3 wins for Cleveland last year. Is this a 3-win roster? Let's start with that. When you look at this team, do you look at, that's a 3-win roster?
I mean, what did Bill Parcells say? You are what your record says you are. They did miss some guys from injuries last year, but obviously the quarterback situation was why they were bad last year. They've got some pretty good players on defense, although they struggled with injuries on the back end last year as well. But I liked what Jim Schwartz did last year. He adapted through a lot more exotic blitzes at teams than people have associated with Schwartz. But offensively, Mike, who's their quarterback? Is it Joe Flacco? Is it Kenny Pickett? Is it Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders? Either one, not one of those four gives me a whole lot of confidence because I just don't, they're just okay at this stage of their career.
Yeah, and this is, they have, Jerry Jeudy's out there. Obviously they traded for him and brought him over, so he's a guy people thought would be a playmaker. Deontay Johnson's had a wild tour, but he's had some talent there. David Njoku, another very talented guy. But for whatever reason, they just, this offense, the quarterback situation with Watson's been a mess. Flacco got him to the playoffs a couple of years ago. They got 4 guys to pick from. That offense just doesn't scream like this is going to be a consistent bunch here no matter how you look at it. But you talked about the injuries that they had, but their defense, the talent they have on the defensive side of the ball, you're like, hey, if they get competent quarterback play, can they be in the wild card mix with this defense?
I think it would take a whole – isn't Joker hurt? I thought that he was going to be out for a little bit there from the Browns. Their linebacker. Not Njoku, Joker. They call it Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah.
Yes. He is out. Yes,
correctly. He's going to miss the entire season from a neck injury, and that's rough for them. We know how important when you play the wide 9 like Jim Schwartz does that it is to have these linebackers who can get downhill and make tackles. That's why they drafted Carson Schwarzenegger at UCLA in the second round. They've got Jordan Hicks, who's a good player, but he's obviously getting up there.
He's getting older, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like Myles Garrett is a great player, but who else on this defense really strikes you? Denzel Ward can be a very good cornerback. He's a little bit inconsistent. Same thing with Delpit. He was hurt last year. I don't know. I just don't know if you're going to struggle offensively, you need to shut down defense.
Well, I also look at this team, Geoff, the dysfunction at the quarterback position, and it's like, which of these 4 should be the quarterback? Well, you can make a case for all 4. That's never a good sign. Then you've got the second-round pick, Kushan Judkins. He never signed his contract, got into some domestic violence stuff the other day or something. You might not even have a second-round pick who would even, so you got that happening already. It just seems like dysfunction is surrounds this team.
I would agree with you. I think the only thing that would give you a little bit of, listen, if you're not going to have the greatest personnel or you're going to have injuries, you need a good coaching staff. And I do believe, I know some people wouldn't agree with me, but I think Kevin Stefanski's a good coach. I remember, 2 years ago, they won double-digit games where they had Flacco coming in and, basically leading them back to the playoffs with his play. I think offensively, Kevin Stefanski knows how to coach. You just got to, and of course, they traded away Amari Cooper. They don't really have a wide receiver among Cedric Tillman, Jerry Jeudy, and Deontay Johnson of all people. That's going to really, make you really inspired by what they can do offensively, especially with their O-line and quarterback play. But Stefanski's a good coach, and I think Jim Schwartz has obviously proven to be a very good D coordinator in this league. So hopefully, I'm sure the Browns are banking on that, hoping that their coaching can help them overcome their personnel issues.
All right, Geoff Mosher sitting in the Andrew DeCecco's seat today, and normally at the end of these previews, we'll ask him to give his order of finish in the AFC North. Geoff Mosher, so how will they finish in the AFC North this season?
The Ravens will win the AFC North.
Ravens won.
Again, I'm gonna pay the price for this, but I'm gonna put the Bengals 2, Steelers 3, and Browns 4.
Cincy 2.
I don't know how the Steelers do it every year, Mike. I guess that it goes to my point about if you're not going to have the greatest personnel on one side of the ball, have great coaches.
Well, you know what? They signed a deal with the devil this time. They tried to break from the Steelers' lore, and now they're going to pay for it. I agree with you there. Ravens, Cincy, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland. That is our AFC North preview as our Football at 4 previews continue next week. We will go to the AFC South, and that, of course, is maybe the worst division in all of football. We'll take a look at those 4 teams here on the Sports Bash Live. Geoff Mosher pinch hits today for Andrew DeCecco, and you're like Rusty Staub. Good job.
Oh, that's good. The big ginger Rusty Staub. I remember him. See you later.
See you, man. All right, Geoff Mosher, everybody. Football at 4 here, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.